Human pulled the alien girl from the snow pit, triggering a biological right she couldn't stop. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Jacob Carter had seen his fair share of extreme conditions in his time working as an engineer on various hostile planets. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him as he trudged through the deep snow on the icy world of Niron 4. The temperature had plummeted to a brutal -40 degrees Fahrenheit, the biting wind cutting through his protective gear, and yet something caught his attention from the corner of his eye. A soft, almost inaudible cry, carried by the wind. Jacob paused, his heart racing as he scanned the landscape. Nothing but endless white, broken only by the occasional jagged rock. But then, he saw it, a figure, partially buried in the snow. His instincts kicked in, and without a second thought, he moved toward the body, each step feeling heavier as the cold seeped through his boots. The figure was an alien, a woman, no, a girl, her skin a deep shade of azure, and her silver hair was scattered across the snow like strands of frost. She appeared unconscious, her body nearly frozen, the snow around her stained with a faint, unnatural glow. Jacob's heart hammered in his chest as he rushed to her side, feeling the immense cold radiating from her body. She was breathing, but just barely. Without thinking, he scooped her up, using every ounce of strength to lift her into his arms. Her body was light, but the weight of the situation was not. The alien girl stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open, revealing two pools of silver that locked onto his. For a moment, they both stared at each other, an unlikely pair. Jacob was a human, an earthborn man, and she was an alien, far from his world in more ways than one. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Instead, she gasped, a sound that seemed to tremble in the icy air. Jacob adjusted his grip, his breath fogging in the cold as he turned to find shelter. It wasn't just the freezing temperature that made him anxious, it was something in her eyes, something in the way she looked at him. He had no idea who she was, or where she came from, but one thing was certain, this wasn't just a simple rescue. There was something deeper, something he couldn't explain. As he carried her toward the small cave he had spotted earlier, he felt her body warm in his arms, but not from the heat of the shelter. No, it was something else. A strange, almost electric pulse that seemed to radiate from her. Jacob's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. What was happening? The girl's breathing deepened, but then she stirred again, her hands grabbing at his chest as if to push him away. But there was no force behind it, only desperation. "You can't," she whispered, her voice trembling, though Jacob wasn't sure if it was from the cold or fear. Her eyes widened, and for a brief second, Jacob felt a chill run down his spine, deeper than the freezing air around them. He tried to speak, to ask her what she meant, but before he could, her body suddenly stiffened, her breathing quickening as she gasped for air. "What is happening?" Jacob whispered to himself, trying to hold her steady. And then, it happened. The air around them seemed to shift. There was a sudden warmth that spread through the cave, though it wasn't from the fire he had started. It came from her. The girl's body began to glow faintly, an ethereal light that surrounded her in a soft, pulsing hue. Jacob's hands trembled as he held her, feeling the intense heat radiating from her body. Her breathing became more erratic, and her eyes flashed with a strange light as her form seemed to vibrate with energy. Jacob could feel it now, too. The air was thick with something unfamiliar, something biological, primal, and deeply instinctual. He was trapped, unable to pull away as the girl's body seemed to reach out to him. And just as suddenly as it began, the light faded, and the warmth ebbed away, leaving Jacob breathless and unsure of what he had just witnessed. The girl collapsed in his arms. Again, her body going limp. But Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had just occurred, it wasn't over. Something had been triggered, something inside her, and something inside him. The question now was, what would happen next? Jacob's heart raced as he knelt beside the alien girl, now unconscious in his arms. The warmth she had emitted moments ago was fading, leaving only the cold of the cave around them. He carefully adjusted her body, laying her down gently on the makeshift bed of furs and blankets he had scavenged earlier. The flickering light of the fire cast shadows across her striking face, and Jacob couldn't help but study her features more closely. Her skin, a rich shade of blue, seemed almost iridescent under the firelight. Her silver hair, though disheveled from the snow, shimmered like starlight. Jacob had seen many alien species in his travels, but nothing had quite captivated him like this. She was so different, so foreign. Yet in the midst of this vast, unfeeling galaxy, here she was vulnerable and in need of help. As he sat back on his heels, Jacob thought about the strange event that had just unfolded. The light. The warmth. What had happened to her? He knew that alien biology could be wildly different from his own, but this felt personal. Like something beyond physical need. He had no answers, only questions. His thoughts were interrupted when the girl stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes, bright and silver like polished metal, met his gaze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Jacob felt a wave of relief, though it didn't erase the confusion that lingered in his mind. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice low as though not to startle her. The alien girl blinked, as if trying to gather her thoughts, before finally speaking in a voice that was gentle yet edged with something foreign. I shouldn't be alive," she whispered, her voice trembling as she shifted her weight slightly, her hand reaching up toward her chest. Jacob watched, not sure how to respond. "Why not?" he asked, hoping she would explain. The girl hesitated, looking around the cave as if she could barely make sense of her surroundings. "Because of what I am," she said softly, her words almost lost in the crackling of the fire. "What are you?" Jacob asked, his curiosity piqued despite himself. She turned her head to face him fully, her silver eyes locking onto his. "I am a Solarian," she said, her voice steady now, though there was a faint edge to it. "We have rituals, biological rites that must be followed. But I have never felt anything like this before. When you touched me, when you pulled me from the snow. I didn't think it was possible for someone like me to feel this." She looked away, her expression filled with a mix of confusion and wonder. Jacob's mind raced. He had no idea what she was talking about, but it seemed like her biological processes were far more complex than anything he had encountered before. But there was one thing he understood clearly: whatever had happened, it had connected them in a way neither of them fully understood. The girl's breathing deepened, and for a brief moment, Jacob thought she had fallen asleep again. But then she looked back at him, her silver eyes glimmering. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For saving me. You don't know how much it means." Jacob nodded, unsure of how to respond. He had saved her, yes, but there was something deeper at play, something far beyond just helping someone in need. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever this was, whatever had been triggered when he pulled her from the snow, it wasn't just a rescue. It was something much more significant. The fire flickered, casting a soft glow over the room, and Jacob sat there in the quiet, wondering what the future held. For him, for her, and for whatever force had brought them together in that cave, so far from everything he knew. He didn't have the answers yet. But as he looked at her again, Jacob knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than either of them could understand. Jacob sat quietly by the fire, watching as the girl, Arya, drifted in and out of sleep. Her breathing had steadied, but the tension in the air was palpable. He had no idea what to do next. Her words echoed in his mind: "I shouldn't be alive." What did she mean by that? He glanced at her once more, taking in the way her blue skin seemed to shimmer in the firelight. She was beautiful, in a way that was so different from anything he'd ever seen. Jacob had been to many planets, seen many species, but nothing had ever made him feel this way. There was something about her that both intrigued and terrified him. As the fire crackled, Arya stirred again, this time with more purpose. She slowly opened her eyes, and for a brief moment, their gazes met. Her silver eyes held a depth of emotion, something Jacob couldn't quite place. "You're awake," Jacob said softly, as he leaned forward, unsure if she was ready to speak. She nodded, her voice a quiet whisper. "I don't know how to explain this, but when you touched me, something happened. A part of me awoke. Jacob frowned. A part of you? He didn't know if he was asking the right question, but it was all he could think of. She shifted, slowly sitting up, and Jacob instinctively moved closer, though he kept a respectful distance. I'm sorry, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I don't know how to explain it, but we, the Solarians, we have a biological process. A ritual. It's triggered by, she paused, looking away as if she was searching for the right words. By what? Jacob prompted gently. By the presence of a suitable partner, Arya murmured, her face flushed as she looked down at the blankets around her. A partner? Jacob repeated, unsure of what she meant. For our species, it's not just a choice. It's a biological need, one that our bodies compel us to fulfill when the right circumstances arise, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Jacob felt his stomach tighten, the weight of her words settling over him. This was beyond anything he had ever experienced. He had only meant to help her, to get her out of the snow and to safety. But now, the situation was far more complicated. Are you saying that because I helped you, your body chose me? He asked, his voice low with a mix of confusion and something else, something he couldn't quite define. Arya nodded, her eyes avoiding his. It's not something I can control. It's part of who we are. It's a ritual, a need that must be fulfilled, and when it's triggered, there's no stopping it, she said, her voice tinged with regret. Jacob leaned back, processing everything she had just told him. This was all new to him. But he had to focus on what mattered, her survival, the strange ritual, and what it all meant for him. He wasn't sure how to respond, but instinct told him to reassure her. I don't think you need to worry about that right now, Jacob said gently, his voice steady. You're safe here. That's all that matters. Arya looked at him, her silver eyes searching his face. I don't want to put you in danger, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to make you part of this ritual. Jacob shook his head, his expression softening. You didn't ask for this, and neither did I. We'll figure it out. Just focus on getting better, okay? There was a long pause as they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Jacob had no idea what the future held or how this would change things, but for now, all he could do was try to help her. Try to keep her safe. As the night grew colder, Jacob added another log to the fire, his thoughts swirling with everything Arya had told him. The unknowns weighed heavily on him, but he refused to let fear control him. He would help her. Whatever this biological right meant, whatever was happening to them both, he wasn't going to back away. He had already stepped into this unknown world, and there was no turning back now. Jacob sat next to the fire, staring into the flames, his mind racing with everything Arya had told him. The silence between them felt heavier than the cold air outside the cave. Arya, wrapped in the blankets Jacob had given her, seemed lost in thought, her silver eyes distant. He couldn't shake the feeling that things were more complicated than he had imagined. The ritual. The strange connection between them. And yet, as much as he tried to focus on his mission to keep her safe, his thoughts kept drifting back to the way her body had reacted to his touch, to the warmth she had given off. The words she had said echoed in his mind, a biological need, a ritual. What kind of ritual was this? He didn't know, but there was no denying the pull he felt when he was near her. It wasn't just about survival anymore, there was something deeper at play, something primal. He tried to push those thoughts aside. Arya was still recovering. He needed to focus on helping her, not on his own confusion. You're quiet, Arya's voice broke through his thoughts, soft but steady. Jacob looked at her, surprised to see her looking directly at him. I'm just thinking, he replied. About what? She asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Jacob paused for a moment, unsure of how to answer. He wasn't ready to admit to her that his thoughts were constantly pulled toward her, that everything had changed since he had pulled her from that snow pit. Just, how to make sure you're okay, he finally said, forcing a smile. Arya studied him for a long moment, her eyes sharp despite the weariness that lingered in them. You're not like the others, she said, almost as if to herself. What do you mean? Jacob asked, his curiosity piqued. You treat me differently. Not like a mission. Not like a problem to solve, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Jacob shifted uncomfortably, not knowing how to respond. He hadn't really thought about it that way. To him, Arya wasn't just an alien. She was someone who needed help, someone who was hurt, and he couldn't just walk away from that. But hearing it from her, it made him realize just how much he had been drawn to her. I guess. I just want to do the right thing, he said, shrugging. Arya smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since they had met. You're different from what I expected, she said softly. How's that? Jacob asked, his brow furrowing. Most humans I've encountered are quick to make judgments. Quick to offer help, but only for their own gain. But you. She paused, searching for the right words. You don't seem to have any ulterior motives. You don't act like I'm some prize to be one. Jacob was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't looking for anything from her. He hadn't even considered what might happen after they left the cave. He was just trying to do what felt right. I don't think of you as a prize, he said, his voice sincere. I think of you as someone who deserves to be treated like a person, not a mission or a cause. Arya's expression softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked at him with something like gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Jacob nodded, feeling a strange warmth spread through him. The connection between them was undeniable, but he wasn't sure where it would lead. All he knew was that he couldn't turn back now. They had crossed a line, but not one he regretted. As the fire crackled, Jacob leaned back against the cave wall, his eyes drifting to the entrance where the storm outside continued to rage. It didn't matter. They would figure it out, one step at a time. For now, the most important thing was keeping her safe. And that's what he would do. No matter what happened next. Jacob woke up to the sound of wind howling outside the cave, the storm still raging on the planet's surface. He glanced over at Arya, who was still asleep, her breathing steady, but her brow furrowed in what looked like discomfort. He had been awake for hours, lost in thought about everything that had happened since they had met. The strange ritual that had been triggered. The growing connection between them. He still didn't fully understand it, but it was becoming clear that whatever had been awakened in Arya, it was more than just a biological response. It was something deeper, something that seemed to bind them together. Jacob stood up quietly, making sure not to disturb her as he moved to stoke the fire. The warmth of the flames was a welcome relief against the cold that seeped through the cave walls. He thought about what Arya had said the night before, the part where she had described the Solarians' biological needs. He didn't know what kind of ritual it was, but he knew that it was more than just a simple act of survival. He felt it too. The way his heart raced when he was near her. The way his body reacted to her presence. It wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about something else, something far more complicated. Jacob pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. He needed to make sure she was comfortable and well enough to leave the cave soon. He didn't know how long the storm would last, but he couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. As he poked the fire, Jacob's thoughts drifted back to Earth, to the life he had left behind. He hadn't planned to stay on this planet for long. His mission had been a short one, just another engineering job on a far-off world. But now, things were different. He wasn't just here for a job anymore. He was here because of Arya, because of what they were going through together. His thoughts were interrupted when Arya stirred, her eyes opening slowly. She looked at him, a faint smile appearing on her face as she sat up. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still a little raspy from the cold. Jacob smiled back, relieved to see that she was awake and alert. "Morning. How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Arya rubbed her eyes and nodded, though there was still a trace of worry in her expression. "Better. Still, strange," she said, her gaze wandering to the fire. "I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't expect you." Jacob's heart skipped a beat, and he felt a strange sense of warmth spread through him. I didn't expect you either, he replied, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Arya turned to face him, her silver eyes locking onto his. What does this mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Jacob admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But I know that I don't want to leave you here, alone. I'll stay with you until we figure this out. There was a long pause as they looked at each other, the tension in the air thickening. Jacob didn't know where this was headed, but he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't walking away. Not from her. Not now. Thank you, Arya said quietly, her voice full of gratitude and something else, something unspoken. Jacob nodded, trying to steady his racing heart. We'll figure it out. Together, he said, his voice firm. As the storm outside continued to rage, the fire flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the cave. It wasn't just a storm outside. It was a storm inside them both, one that neither of them fully understood yet. But whatever it was, Jacob knew that it was something they would face together. And for the first time in what felt like forever, that thought brought him a sense of peace. Arya had become more than just a mission. She had become someone he cared about, someone he couldn't bear to lose. And whatever ritual was pulling them together, whatever was happening between them, he would face it with her by his side. The days passed in the cave, the storm outside never seeming to let up. Jacob and Arya spent their time in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but the connection between them was undeniable. Arya had recovered, her strength slowly returning, but she still looked at Jacob with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Jacob, for his part, couldn't stop thinking about her. Her eyes, her soft voice, the way she had spoken about her people's rituals, it all haunted him. He had never felt this way before. Never had he cared so much for someone he barely knew, someone who wasn't even human. Yet, here he was, willing to risk everything for her. One afternoon, as they sat by the fire, Arya spoke, her voice breaking the silence that had settled over them. Jacob, she said softly, her silver eyes meeting his. I don't want you to feel like you have to stay. I know that what's happening between us is complicated. I didn't ask for this. Jacob looked at her, his heart pounding. I'm not leaving, he said firmly. I don't care what's happening. I'm not walking away from you. Arya's eyes softened, and she looked away, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of the blanket wrapped around her. You don't understand, she whispered, almost to herself. The Solarians were not meant to bond with humans. It's against everything we were taught. Jacob moved closer to her, his voice gentle. What do you mean? What do you believe in? Arya turned to face him, her expression troubled. Our people, we believe in perfection. In purity. We're meant to stay with our own kind. But when you touched me, something shifted. It's as if my body knew you were the one. But I don't know how to control it. I'm afraid it's too much. Jacob's chest tightened as he listened. Arya, listen to me, he said softly. I don't care about any of that. What matters is what's real, right here, right now. I'm not afraid of you. I don't care if we're different. I just want to be here with you. Arya was silent for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face. She seemed to be looking for something, an answer, a reassurance. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You really don't care? You're not afraid? Jacob shook his head, his voice steady. No, I'm not afraid. I'm not going anywhere. Arya looked down at her hands, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent so much of her life learning to follow the rules of her people, to honor their traditions. But here, with Jacob, everything felt different. She felt something she had never known, something deep and powerful, something she couldn't ignore. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. You don't know how much that means to me. Jacob smiled, a sense of calm washing over him. I'm glad I could help. The fire crackled between them, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the cold outside. As the days continued to pass, Jacob and Arya grew closer, their bond strengthening with each passing moment. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of silence, but through it all, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. Jacob didn't know what would happen when they left the cave, when the storm finally cleared. But for now, he was content to be here, with her, in this moment. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. The days in the cave grew quieter as Jacob and Arya spent more time together. The storm outside had yet to let up, but inside the cave, there was a growing sense of calm. Jacob had kept his promise to stay, and though they hadn't talked much about it, he knew that Arya appreciated his presence. It was as though a subtle shift had occurred between them, a mutual understanding that had deepened into something more, though neither was ready to acknowledge it aloud. One evening, after Arya had spent the day resting and Jacob had been tinkering with some of his equipment, he came back to the fire and found her sitting up, her silver eyes focused on the flames. Her posture was relaxed, but there was a distant look in her gaze, a look that made Jacob pause. "Arya," he asked softly, careful not to startle her. She turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "About what you said. About us. And, what happens next?" Jacob felt his heart rate increase. "What do you mean?" he asked. Sitting down across from her. Arya sighed, her eyes moving away from him as she glanced down at her hands, fidgeting with the edges of her blanket. "I don't know what to do with all of this. I've never felt anything like it. I was taught to believe that we, the Solarians, are meant to be with our own kind. But when you saved me, everything changed. It's like something inside me woke up, and now I don't know what to do with it." Jacob remained silent for a moment, absorbing her words. He understood what she was saying. He had felt the shift in himself too, the pull that seemed to draw him toward her, but he had no idea how to explain it. "I don't know what it means either," he said finally, his voice soft. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, Arya. You don't have to figure this all out by yourself." Arya met his gaze then, her silver eyes shining in the dim light of the fire. "But what if you're wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we're not meant to be together? What if all of this is just a mistake?" Jacob shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I don't think it's a mistake," he said gently. "I think sometimes, the things that happen to us don't make sense at first, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. But I'm not going to walk away. I'm here, and I want to help you figure this out. Whatever this is." Arya looked down at the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on her face. She seemed to be weighing his words, trying to make sense of them in her own way. After a moment, she nodded, though there was still uncertainty in her expression. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she said softly, "but I trust you, Jacob. I trust that you're not going to hurt me." Jacob's heart swelled at her words. Trust wasn't something easily given, especially in situations like theirs. But in this moment, with the storm still raging outside, the two of them sitting by the fire in that small, dimly lit cave, it felt as though they had crossed a threshold. There was no going back now. "I won't hurt you, Arya," he said quietly, his voice firm. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since they had met, Arya allowed herself to relax, her shoulders softening as she leaned back against the stone wall of the cave. Jacob sat beside her, the fire crackling between them, the warmth of the flames a small comfort in the midst of the unknown. Neither of them knew what the future held, but in that moment, they were both willing to face it together. As the storm continued to howl outside, they sat in silence, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing hour. The storm outside began to subside, the howling winds lessening to a quiet whisper against the cave walls. Jacob and Arya had spent the last few days learning to live with the silence, the stillness between them growing as the days passed. Jacob couldn't help but notice how much more at ease Arya seemed now, though there was still a tension in her that he couldn't fully understand. She had spent so much of her life in the shadow of her people's expectations, their rigid ways, and now, here she was, far from everything she knew, alone with him in a strange and dangerous world. They had come a long way since that first night in the cave, but Jacob knew that they weren't out of the woods yet. The storm might have passed, but the uncertainty of their future remained. Arya had told him about her people, their customs, and their rules, and Jacob was beginning to understand just how deeply ingrained those expectations were in her. She was struggling with something deep inside, something that went beyond the physical pull between them. It was the weight of her culture, the fear of breaking from it, and the fear of what it would mean for both of them. One evening, after the fire had burned low and the air in the cave had grown colder, Jacob found himself watching Arya as she sat near the entrance, her gaze lost in the distance. Her posture was still tense, her shoulders rigid despite the warmth of the fire. He knew that she had something on her mind, something she hadn't said yet. He wasn't sure what it was, but he could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. "Arya?" Jacob called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned her head, her silver eyes meeting his. There was something in her gaze, something both vulnerable and guarded at the same time. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. She hesitated for a moment, then looked back at the cave entrance. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said quietly, her voice distant. "About not leaving. About staying." Jacob felt a tightness in his chest. "And?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to make sense of this. Of us. I've spent my entire life being told that we can't be with someone like you. That it's wrong. But now, I don't know what's right anymore." Jacob sat in silence for a moment, absorbing her words. He understood what she was saying, and he knew that her struggle wasn't just about them, it was about everything she had been taught, everything she had grown up with. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," he said softly, his voice steady. "I'm not asking you to. We'll take it one step at a time. We don't have to have all the answers." Arya looked at him, her expression softening as she considered his words. "But what if I can't let go of what I was taught?" she asked, her voice full of doubt. "What if I can't overcome everything I've been raised to believe?" Jacob moved to sit beside her, not close enough to invade her space, but close enough that she could feel his presence. "You don't have to let go of everything," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You just have to let yourself be who you are, without the pressure of what others think. I'm not asking you to change your whole life. But you don't have to do it alone, Arya. I'm here. And I'll be here, no matter what." She met his gaze again, her silver eyes filled with uncertainty, but also something else, something that seemed to be flickering beneath the surface. A faint glimmer of hope. She nodded slowly, then turned her attention back to the entrance, where the last of the snow had begun to fall softly. The storm was finally over, and for the first time in a long while, the air felt still, calm. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely reaching his ears. Jacob smiled softly, his heart lightening at the sincerity in her voice. "Anytime, Arya. Anytime." And for the first time, Jacob felt a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he knew that they would face it together. Whatever came next, they would figure it out one step at a time. Jacob stood at the entrance of the cave, looking out over the vast expanse of snow and ice that stretched for miles in every direction. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world of quiet stillness. He could feel the weight of the silence, the air thick with anticipation. He glanced back at Arya, who was standing behind him, her silver eyes reflecting the soft glow of the fading light. It had been days since they first arrived at the cave, and in that time, everything had changed. Their bond had grown stronger, and Jacob felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. But now, with the storm gone, the question of what came next lingered in the air between them. Arya had recovered enough to travel, but the uncertainty of their future still hung heavily in the air. "Are you ready?" Jacob asked, turning to face her. Arya nodded, her expression determined but still tinged with uncertainty. "I think so," she said softly. "I don't know what we're going to face out there, but I'm ready to find out. With you." Jacob felt a swell of warmth in his chest at her words. He wasn't sure what had changed within him, but something about Arya had awakened a strength he didn't know he had. It was more than just the pull of a biological ritual, it was something deeper, something that had grown between them over the past few days. "Then let's go," Jacob said, offering her a reassuring smile. Together, they stepped out of the cave, the cold air biting at their skin as they walked toward the horizon. The path ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together. The world outside was vast and unknown, but Jacob knew that as long as they had each other, they could survive anything. The journey would be long, but the bond between them had already proven stronger than any obstacle they could encounter. And so, with the winds at their backs and the promise of a future together, they walked into the unknown, ready to face whatever came their way. Jacob didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: the path ahead would not be easy, but it would be theirs to walk, side by side.